The baby's fingers closed around the sleeve of Cassian Vale's tuxedo. Just like that. No warning. The child looked up with eyes the color of a winter storm, the exact shade Cassian saw every morning when he faced his own reflection. Same jaw. Same dimple. Same quiet intensity behind the gaze. The ballroom kept moving around them. Crystal chandeliers. A live orchestra. Hundreds of guests. All of it reduced to background noise in a single second. Because standing 10 feet away, beneath the warm gold light of the estate's grand entrance, was Rowan Ashford. The man Cassian had forced out of his life exactly 2 years ago. Rowan didn't move. He didn't smile. He just watched. Then he said quietly, calm enough to cut straight through the music. "You wanted a divorce." The room didn't stop. But Cassian's entire world did. "Something's happened," Rowan continued. "After you left." The child shifted in Rowan's arms. Turned toward Cassian. Tilted his head with that familiar expression, curious, unafraid, completely open. And then, in a voice so small it barely reached the air between them, the boy pointed directly at Cassian and asked, "Daddy, who is that man?" Everything stopped. To understand why that question changed 3 lives forever, we need to go back 2 years. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday. Rowan found them on the kitchen counter, not handed to him, not explained, not preceded by a single conversation. Just a manila envelope. His full name typed cleanly on the label. He stood there for a long time before he opened it. The marble floors of the penthouse were cold beneath his feet. The morning light came through the floor-to-ceiling windows the way it always did, clean, golden, indifferent. The kind of light that made everything look peaceful even when it wasn't. Rowan pulled the documents out slowly. Cassian's signature was already on every page. No note inside. No explanation. Not even an apology. Rowan read through the language 3 times. Legal terms. Asset division clauses. A clean severance of everything they had built together over 4 years. He set the papers down on the counter. Picked them back up. Set them down again. Then he noticed the date printed at the top. Today. His birthday. Hi viewers, if you found out your partner filed for divorce without a single conversation, would you try to fight for the relationship, or would you walk away for good? Tell me in the comments right now. He called Cassian's direct number. Straight to voicemail. He called again. Same result. He sent 3 messages over the next 6 hours. Each one read and left without a response. By evening, Cassian's assistant had emailed Rowan a moving timeline and a list of approved items he was permitted to take from the property. That was the conversation. That was the goodbye. No argument. No confrontation. No door slamming or raised voices or the kind of scene that at least proves the other person felt something. Just silence, organized, efficient, and completely deliberate. Rowan packed a single bag that night. He didn't take the artwork he had made for the living room. Didn't take the anniversary photographs still in frames on the bedroom shelf. Didn't take anything that required Cassian to notice it was gone. He took his clothes. His sketchbooks. And the one small thing that had been sitting in his coat pocket since the doctor's appointment 2 weeks earlier, the appointment he had planned to share with Cassian over dinner, as soon as the timing felt right. He had been waiting for the right moment. The right moment never came. He rode the elevator down from the 42nd floor alone. Walked through the lobby without looking at the security staff who had known him for years. Pushed through the glass front doors into the cold November air. Behind him, the building stood exactly as it always had. Immovable. Expensive. Completely unchanged. As if he had never been there at all. Rowan kept walking. He didn't stop until he reached a bench 3 blocks away, where he sat down, exhaled slowly, and finally let himself feel the full weight of what had just happened. 4 years. Gone. No reason given. No chance to speak. He reached into his coat pocket. His fingers found the small folded paper, the doctor's printout, already soft at the edges from being handled so many times. He looked at it for a long moment, then folded it back up and pressed it flat against his palm. Whatever came next, he would figure it out alone. 3 weeks later, Rowan's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. A smooth voice on the other end. Careful. Friendly in a way that felt rehearsed. Mr. Ashford. My name isn't important. What is important is that you understand, staying in this city is no longer safe for you. The line went dead before Rowan could respond. He stood in the middle of his small temporary apartment, holding the phone, staring at the wall. Then it rang again. Different number. Same voice. He can't protect you anymore. And he won't try. You understand that now, don't you? Rowan hung up. He didn't sleep that night. By morning, he had already decided. He wasn't running. He was choosing. There was a difference, and that difference was the only thing keeping him upright. 3 floors below Cassian Vale's private office, in a room with no windows and 2 locks on the door, a man named Darius Crow reviewed his work one final time. The files were clean. The timestamps were perfect. The financial trails looked exactly the way he needed them to look. He leaned back in his chair and allowed himself a small, quiet moment of satisfaction. It had taken 4 months to build this. 4 months of patience. Of careful placement. Of waiting for exactly the right pressure point. Darius had served Cassian's organization for 11 years. He knew every system. Every contact. Every vulnerability in the structure. And the most significant vulnerability, the one Darius had identified almost immediately, was Rowan. Not because Rowan was weak. Because Cassian wasn't. An alpha who had dismantled 3 rival organizations without breaking a sweat became a completely different person the moment Rowan walked into a room. Slower to act. More careful. More exposed. That kind of shift was dangerous at the level they operated. Darius had flagged it early. Internally. Then he decided to do something about it. The documents he had assembled were thorough. Financial transfers routed through shell accounts connected to Rowan's personal information. Communication logs that had been edited with surgical precision. 3 separate testimonies from associates who owed Darius favors and understood the cost of loyalty in this world. Taken together, the evidence painted a clear picture. Rowan had been feeding sensitive information to a competing network for over a year. None of it was true. Every piece of it had been engineered. But truth, in Cassian's world, moved slower than doubt. Darius knew that. He had counted on it. Cassian had gone quiet for 3 days after receiving the files. No meetings. No calls. Darius had watched from a careful distance as the Alpha processed what he'd been given, cross-referencing, verifying, running his own checks. The checks confirmed everything. Because Darius had made sure they would. On the 4th day, Cassian called him into the office. Sat across from him. Said nothing for almost a full minute. Then, set up the legal process. I want it handled quietly. Darius had nodded. Professionally. Carefully. He did not allow himself to smile until he was back in the hallway. Now, weeks later, sitting alone in that windowless room, he reviewed the final piece of the operation, a second set of documents, prepared in advance, designed to shift the organization's majority governance structure in the event that Cassian's personal instability continued to compromise operations. It was almost ready. One more step. He closed the files, stood up, and walked toward the elevator. In the lobby of the building, 3 miles away, Rowan Ashford was boarding a taxi to the airport. His one bag sat on the seat beside him. His hand was pressed flat over his coat pocket. Darius didn't know about the doctor's printout. He didn't know about the appointment. He didn't know the one detail that would have changed every calculation he had made, the detail that was currently folded against Rowan's palm, small and quiet and completely invisible. Some loose threads don't announce themselves. They just wait. Back in Cassian's office, a single file sat open on his desk, the last one Darius had handed him. The one that had made the decision feel certain. Cassian stared at it now. Something about page 4 had been bothering him for 2 weeks. A timestamp. The smallest detail. He couldn't explain why it felt wrong. He just knew that it did. The new apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled like old carpet and someone else's cooking. Rowan found it through an online listing. Paid the first 2 months in cash. Gave the landlord a name that wasn't a lie, just a version of himself that felt safer in a city where nobody knew him yet. He spent the first night sitting on the floor because the second-hand mattress hadn't been delivered. He had one lamp, a bag of groceries, his sketchbooks, and a coat that was too thin for the winter coming in through the badly sealed window. He sat there for a long time. Not crying. Not angry. Just present. Just aware of where he was and how far it was from where he'd been. Then he opened his sketchbook and began to draw. Not from memory, or at least not the memories he was trying to avoid. He drew the window. The single lamp throwing a circle of yellow light against the bare wall. The shadow of the fire escape cutting across the floor in diagonal bars. He drew the shape of the room. The shape of quiet. The shape of starting over. By the time he stopped, it was almost 3 in the morning. His hand was stiff. His back ached from sitting without support. He closed the sketchbook and lay down on the floor with his coat folded under his head. He thought about the printout in his pocket. He was 8 weeks along. The doctor had confirmed it plainly. Healthy indicators, standard progression, no complications. She had handed him a printed summary with that calm, professional warmth that medical offices do so well, and had asked whether he had a support system in place. Rowan had said yes. It was the first lie he had told in years. He stared at the ceiling now. The water stain above him had the shape of something he couldn't quite identify. He lay there trying to name it, a continent maybe, or the silhouette of a building. Until his eyes grew heavy and the ceiling blurred and sleep finally arrived, quiet and dreamless. He woke early. Found a job listing for a graphic design contractor on his phone. Applied before breakfast. Then found a second listing, evening shifts at a copy center 2 blocks away. Applied for that too. He made coffee with a second-hand kettle and stood at the window drinking it, watching the street below come alive in the gray morning light. He did not think about the penthouse. He did not think about the marble floors or the art on the walls or the way Cassian used to stand in the kitchen early on Saturday mornings before the city got loud. He thought about the next 6 months. The doctor's appointments he would make alone. The room he would need to clear out and turn into something safe and warm. The name he had already been quietly turning over in his mind, a name that felt steady, that felt like something worth holding on to. Orion. It meant something. He liked that. 3 weeks into the new apartment, the design contractor accepted him. 2 days after that, the copy center called him in for a trial shift. By the end of the month, Rowan had a routine that left almost no empty space in the day, which was exactly how he wanted it. Empty space was where the memories lived. He didn't have room for them right now. The second trimester brought fatigue he hadn't expected. He pushed through it. Slept less. Drew more. Started keeping a small journal beside the sketchbooks, not for himself, but for Orion. Short entries. Simple things. The first meal he cooked in the new kitchen. The view from the fire escape on the first night it snowed. The exact way the lamp light looked against the wall. Evidence that someone was paying attention. That someone had been there. At 6 months, he moved into a slightly larger apartment 2 floors up in the same building. The landlord remembered him. Gave him a small discount without being asked. Small kindness. He wrote it down. At 7 months, the Braxton Hicks contraction started waking him at 3 in the morning, and he would lie in the dark talking quietly to the room, to Orion, he supposed, or to himself, or to the space between them, about whatever came to mind. Plans? Questions? Apologies for things that hadn't happened yet. He never called Cassian. He had considered it exactly once. Stood in the kitchen with the phone in his hand, thumb hovering over the contact that had been sitting dormant in his phone for 4 months. Then he put the phone down. Cassian had made his choice. Clearly. Without hesitation. Without even a conversation. Rowan would make his. On a cold February morning, alone in a hospital room with a nurse named Deja who held his hand without being asked, Rowan Ashford came into the world weighing 7 pounds and 3 ounces, with storm blue eyes that took Rowan's breath clean away. He held him for a long time without moving. Then looked up at Deja and said simply, "He looks like him." Deja squeezed his hand. Didn't ask who? Didn't need to. That night, Rowan lay in the hospital bed with Orion asleep against his chest, and he made a decision that felt both final and deeply uncertain, the way real decisions always do. He would raise his son. He would do it right. And the only person who needed to know Orion existed was the one already holding him. Back in New York, in a penthouse that had grown measurably quieter over the past 7 months, Cassian Vale sat at his desk long after midnight, staring at page 4 of a document he had reviewed 40 times. The timestamp was wrong. He was certain now. He pulled a second file. Then a third. His jaw tightened. Somewhere in the city, or out of it, Rowan Ashford had disappeared completely. And Cassian was only now beginning to understand why. Orion walked at 11 months. Not a stumble. A decision. He pulled himself upright on the edge of the coffee table, looked at Rowan with an expression of complete seriousness, and walked 3 full steps across the living room floor before sitting back down hard. Then he looked up. Waiting. Rowan dropped to his knees right there and clapped so loud the neighbor knocked on the wall. He didn't care. He grabbed his phone and recorded 12 seconds of Orion doing it again, slower this time, arms wide, chin raised, deeply proud of himself. And watched the video 4 times before putting the phone down. Then he sat back against the couch and felt the full weight of the moment. No one to call. No one to show. Just the 2 of them, in a 3rd-floor apartment with second-hand furniture and a window that still let in too much cold, marking a first together that would never come around again. He wrote it down in the journal. Described the exact quality of the light. The way Orion smelled, warm, like sleep and something sweet. The way those storm blue eyes had looked at him right before the second attempt. He wrote it all down because someone needed to remember it properly. Because a child deserved a record. By the time Orion turned 1, Rowan had built a life that fit. Not a large life. Not a comfortable life by any standard he had previously known. But a real one, structured, purposeful, theirs. He had moved up at the design firm. Salary increase. Remote flexibility. The evening shifts at the copy center had ended 6 months ago, replaced by a part-time illustration contract with a children's book publisher that paid better and let him work from the kitchen table while Orion napped. The apartment had changed too. The walls had color now. Rowan's work covered most of them. Prints he had made, studies in gouache and ink, one large charcoal piece that Orion had stared at for 20 full minutes one morning, one small hand pressed flat against the paper. The nursery had glow stars on the ceiling. Orion called them the night lights. He called a lot of things by names he invented himself, a habit Rowan encouraged because there was something in it, some kind of confidence in naming the world on your own terms, that he wanted his son to keep. Their mornings had a rhythm. Orion woke early, always vocal about it. A running commentary that Rowan had learned to understand without fully hearing, the way parents learn to read a frequency rather than a language. Breakfast. The window ritual. Orion pressed against the glass, narrating the street below, pointing at buses and pigeons and delivery men with the same level of enthusiasm regardless of category. Then the walk. Same route every day, more or less. 2 blocks north. The park. The bench where Rowan drank his coffee while Orion ran the same small loop along the path, the loop that had grown longer as his legs grew stronger, the radius expanding month by month like a quiet record of time passing. One Tuesday morning, a few weeks after Orion's first birthday, they were on that bench when Orion stopped running. Walked back. Climbed up beside Rowan. Leaned against his arm. Then looked up and asked, out of nothing, out of the clear, cold morning air, "Where's my daddy?" Rowan didn't move. He kept his eyes on the path. Kept his face still. Then he looked down at Orion. Orion was waiting. Completely sincere. Completely open. The way children asked impossible things, without strategy, without agenda, just a clean and honest need to understand the world they're standing in. "He's..." Rowan started. Stopped. Started again. "He's somewhere far away." Orion considered this. "Can we visit?" "Not right now." "Why?" "Because he doesn't know you exist." "Because I made a choice before you were born, and I'm still deciding if it was the right one. Because some things are complicated in ways I don't know how to explain to someone who still calls pigeons gray chickens." Rowan said none of that. He just pressed a hand to the top of Orion's head, warm, solid, present, and said, "One day I'll explain it properly. I promise." Orion seemed to accept this. Slid back off the bench. Returned to his loop. Rowan watched him run. And for the first time since leaving New York, he felt the question beginning to move inside him, slow, uncomfortable, impossible to ignore. Orion was going to keep asking. He was 2 now. Next year he would ask again. The year after that. And every time, the answer was going to require more than far away. More than complicated. More than silence. Rowan picked up his coffee. It had gone cold. He drank it anyway. 3 weeks later, the children's book publisher sent him an invitation to a fundraising event, a charity gala hosted by a private estate on the East Coast. A chance to network with investors in the creative arts sector. Plus one's welcome. Rowan almost declined. He had declined every similar invitation for 2 years. But this one was different. The advance payment attached to a potential new contract was the kind of number that changed calculations. He read the invitation twice. Checked the event details. Looked across the room at Orion, who was sitting on the kitchen floor very seriously attempting to fit a square block into a circular hole. Rowan looked back at the invitation. Then at the address of the hosting estate. His hand went still. He read the address again. Then he sat down slowly. Because the estate on that invitation had one owner. And his name was Cassian Vale. The New York penthouse had a view that other men would have paid almost anything for. Cassian stood at the window and felt nothing. 43 floors of glass and steel and city spread out below him. Lights moving in patterns that never repeated, traffic that never stopped, a skyline that made visitors lose their words and reach for their phones. He had stopped noticing it 2 years ago. He turned away from the window. The study was quiet. Papers on the desk. 3 monitors. A glass of water that had been sitting untouched for over an hour. He had one more in the last 2 years than in the 4 that came before them. 3 acquisitions. A restructuring of the Eastern network that had been failing under old leadership for a decade. A settlement with a rival organization that closed a conflict going back to his father's time. Every analyst in his circle had called it the best 2-year run in the organization's history. Cassian looked at the files on his desk. Felt nothing. The thing about winning without someone to tell, it stopped feeling like winning a long time ago. He sat down. Opened the top drawer. Inside, beneath a secondary layer of organized folders, was a single photograph. He didn't take it out. He had stopped taking it out months ago. But he knew it was there. He always knew it was there. Rowan, 3 years back, at a gallery showing in Brooklyn, his work on the walls, a plastic cup of wine in his hand, caught mid-laugh by a camera he hadn't noticed. Completely unguarded. Completely himself. The kind of expression that couldn't be directed or recreated. Cassian closed the drawer. He had been running his own audit for 6 weeks now. Not of the organization. Of Darius. It had started with the timestamp. That single detail on page 4 that had refused to sit right no matter how many times he reviewed it. He had pulled the original communication logs to verify the metadata. Run the financial records through a secondary analyst who had no connection to Darius's department. What came back had taken 3 days to fully process. The transfers were layered. Complex. Almost perfect. Almost. Because Darius Crow was thorough, but thoroughness, taken far enough, left its own kind of pattern. And patterns, eventually, told the truth even when the individual pieces were constructed to lie. The evidence that had ended Cassian's marriage had been fabricated. All of it. From the initial financial discrepancies to the witness statements to the communication records that had felt so damning at the time, every piece had been built by hand, placed carefully, and designed to collapse Cassian's trust at exactly the right moment. He had read the secondary analyst's report alone. 3 times. Then he had sat in this same chair and stared at the wall for a long time. He did not call anyone. He did not move. He just sat with the full weight of what he had done, what he had been made to do, pressing down on him with a kind of silence that made the whole city outside feel irrelevant. Rowan hadn't betrayed him. Rowan had never betrayed him. Cassian had destroyed a marriage, their marriage, because a man he had trusted for 11 years had understood exactly which lever to pull. He had signed those papers. Without asking. Without a single conversation. He had made Rowan feel like he didn't deserve an explanation, because that was the easiest reading of what Cassian had done, and the easiest readings were often the most accurate ones. He got up from the desk. Crossed to the window again. He had begun trying to locate Rowan the same week the secondary report came in. It was harder than it should have been. Rowan had moved thoroughly. New city. No forwarding address. The phone number had been disconnected. The email address associated with his freelance work was routed through a privacy service. Not vanished. Careful. There was a difference. And Cassian, who had spent his entire career reading the difference between people who ran and people who planned, understood exactly what it meant. Rowan hadn't run in fear. He had chosen distance. Deliberately. Methodically. The way someone does when they've made a decision and committed to it fully. 2 months of careful searching had returned partial results, a design contract under a name close enough to Rowan's that it couldn't be coincidence. A professional listing on an illustrator's platform, no photo, a city listed only as East Coast. Then the gala invitation list arrived on his desk. Standard review process. His events coordinator flagged attendees above a certain professional threshold. Cassian had been moving through the list quickly. Stopped on one name. Read it twice. Rowan Ashford. East Coast illustrator. Currently contracted with the same publishing house that had confirmed attendance. He set the list down. Picked it up again. Sat back. For the first time in 2 years, the city outside his window looked like it had something in it worth seeing. He called his events coordinator. Confirmed all arrangements were finalized. Then he did something he almost never did. He went to his personal calendar and cleared every commitment scheduled for the evening of the gala. Every single one. He sat at the desk afterward. Quiet. Hands flat on the surface. There were things he didn't know yet. Things he couldn't have prepared himself for even if someone had tried to warn him. But he was going to show up. He owed that much. He owed that, and considerably more. On a Tuesday evening, across the country, Rowan Ashford stood in his bathroom mirror adjusting the collar of a shirt he had bought specifically for the occasion. Clean lines, nothing excessive, the kind of thing that said present without saying trying. Orion sat on the bathroom floor behind him, holding a wooden spoon and conducting an orchestra only he could hear. "You look nice, Daddy." Rowan looked at him in the mirror. "Thank you, Ree. Are we going somewhere fancy?" "Kind of." "Will there be cake?" "Probably not for you." Orion considered this. "That's not fair. Life is full of surprises." Orion went back to conducting. Rowan looked at himself for a moment longer. Then he picked up his jacket and said quietly, to no one in particular, "Whatever happens." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Some preparations happen in the body before the mind catches up. He already knew, in some quiet, certain part of himself, that the evening ahead was going to change something. He just didn't know yet how many things. The file landed on Cassian's desk at 11:47 on a Wednesday night. Not from his security team. Not from legal. From a single analyst, young, quiet, thorough, who had been running a parallel review for 6 weeks without telling anyone but Cassian. The cover page had 3 words on it. "You were deceived." Cassian didn't move for a long time. Then he opened it. The first section was financial architecture. 41 pages of shell accounts, routing numbers, and timestamp comparisons laid out in clean columns. The kind of work that required someone who knew exactly what they were doing, and knew exactly how to undo what someone else had done. Darius had been careful. Genuinely careful. But the analyst had found the seam. One single transfer, had been processed through a server that Rowan couldn't have accessed. The account required internal credentials that only 3 people in the organization ever held. Darius was one of them. Rowan was not. Cassian read that section twice. Then kept going. The witness statements were next. 3 of them. The analyst had traced each one back to its origin and found the same pattern. Men who owed Darius favors, men who had been quietly relocated after giving their statements, men whose financial records showed irregular deposits in the weeks following the divorce filing. Paid testimony. Constructed. Every word of it. Cassian set the file down. Picked it back up. Put it down again. He stood up from the desk and walked to the window and stood there with his hands at his sides and looked out at a city that had absolutely nothing useful to offer him right now. 4 years of marriage. Ended in 3 days of manufactured doubt. Because a man he had trusted, had promoted, had protected, had brought into the innermost circle of everything he had built, had decided that Rowan was an obstacle. Not a threat. An obstacle. That distinction hit harder than anything else. Darius hadn't feared Rowan. He had simply found him inconvenient. And Cassian had let that be enough. He turned from the window. The anger was there, controlled, cold, already calculating. But underneath it was something heavier. Something that didn't have the clean edges of anger. Something that settled in the chest and stayed. He had done this. No one had held his hand. He had signed the papers. He had chosen silence over conversation. He had decided that removing Rowan quickly was cleaner than asking a single question. The evidence had been false. The judgment had been his. Both things were true. He sat back down. Opened his laptop. Typed Rowan Ashford into the secure search interface for what felt like the 100th time in 2 months. Same partial results. Same professional ghost, present enough to find, careful enough to keep distance. Then he opened the gala guest list again. Scrolled to the name. Left it open on the screen. The event was 11 days away. He was going to be in that room. And when Rowan walked through the door, Cassian was going to have exactly one opportunity to say the only thing that mattered. Not an explanation. Not a justification. Just the truth. Delivered without an exit. He closed the laptop. In the east wing of the building, in that windowless room with 2 locks on the door, Darius Crow was finishing a phone call. His voice was low. Precise. He had noticed the analyst's extended hours 3 weeks ago. He had not yet determined the scope of the work. But he was close. He ended the call. Sat for a moment. Then opened his own laptop and began reviewing contingency options. The kind that didn't require Cassian's approval, that could be activated quickly, that would create enough disruption to shift focus away from any internal investigation. Darius was patient. He was also practical. And practical men always prepared for the moment their carefully built structures began showing cracks. He had one option he hadn't used yet. The one he'd kept in reserve for exactly this scenario. He pulled the relevant folder. Read through it. Closed it again. Not yet. But soon. The car pulled up to the estate at 7:22 in the evening. Orion was asleep in his car seat, one hand curled under his chin, completely unaware of anything. Rowan sat in the back and looked at the building through the window for a moment. Grand entrance. Stone columns. Warm amber light spilling out through tall windows onto the front steps. Valet attendants in black moving quietly between arriving cars. The kind of event that didn't announce itself, it simply existed, certain of its own weight. He had been here before. 3 years ago, before everything. He remembered the way the foyer smelled, cedar and something floral, quiet expensive things that didn't try too hard. He remembered standing beside Cassian at one of these events and watching him move through a room, effortless, magnetic, the kind of presence that made other people unconsciously adjust their posture. He wasn't thinking about that. Rowan stepped out of the car. The babysitter. His neighbor's college-age daughter, Amara, who Orion adored, was already gathering the bag from the front seat. The plan was simple. Amara would take Orion inside through the side entrance reserved for family guests of attendees, find a quiet sitting room, keep him comfortable until Rowan was finished with the professional obligations. 1 hour. Maybe 2. Get the FaceTime with the publisher's investors, confirm the contract details, exit cleanly. That was the plan. Rowan adjusted his jacket. Climbed the front steps. Handed his invitation to the attendant at the door. The foyer was exactly as he remembered. Cedar. Something floral. The sound of an orchestra carrying from deeper inside the building. Live music, not recorded, the kind of detail that only mattered to people who noticed it. He noticed it. He kept moving. The main hall was full. 200 people at least, arranged in loose clusters around high tables and along the edges of the room where the art installations were lit. Rowan identified the publishing house's table in the first 30 seconds and began moving toward it. He was halfway across the room when he heard it. Not a voice. A silence. The specific kind that happens when someone in a crowd suddenly stops moving and everything around them keeps going. He didn't look up immediately. He told himself he didn't need to. Then he looked up. Cassian was standing 20 feet away. Not moving. Not speaking to anyone. Just standing there in the middle of the room looking directly at him with an expression Rowan had never seen on his face before. Not anger. Not arrogance. Something open. Something that looked, almost, like a man who had been waiting for this exact moment, and was now completely unprepared for it. Rowan stopped. The room kept moving. Music. Conversation. The clink of glasses. All of it continuing around the two of them as if nothing had paused. Then, from across the foyer, from the side hall where Amara had taken Orion, came a small voice. Loud. Confident. Completely unaware of its timing. "Daddy!" Orion came running across the marble floor in his small dress shoes, arms wide, heading straight for Rowan. Rowan crouched to catch him. Lifted him. And when he straightened up with Orion on his hip, he was facing Cassian again. Closer now. 8 feet. Maybe less. And Cassian was staring at Orion. Not the way people stare at other people's children, politely, briefly, moving on. He was staring the way a person stares when something inside them has just broken open and they haven't caught up to it yet. Because Orion had turned. And was looking back at Cassian with those eyes, those storm blue eyes, with the calm, direct curiosity of a child who has never learned to pretend he isn't looking. The resemblance wasn't subtle. It wasn't something you had to angle for or squint to see. It was immediate. Absolute. Undeniable to anyone in the room who happened to be paying attention. Cassian's mouth opened slightly. Closed. Orion tilted his head. Then pointed. "Daddy, who is that man?" The question landed in the space between them like something physical. Rowan held Orion steady against his hip. He didn't look away from Cassian. He said nothing. Cassian took one step forward. Then stopped. Because the look on Rowan's face was not anger. It was not tears. It was the look of a person who has already done the hardest part, the surviving, and is now simply waiting to see whether the person standing in front of him is going to say something worth hearing. Cassian understood that look. He had earned it. He opened his mouth. Then, from somewhere behind him, at the edge of the room, near the service corridor, a door opened quietly. A figure appeared. Stood still. Watching. Darius Crow. Not invited. Not registered on the guest list. Here anyway. And his eyes were not on Cassian. They were on Orion. Cassian found Rowan in the smaller garden room off the east corridor. Rowan had taken Orion back to Amara, spoken to him quietly, kissed the top of his head, and walked away without explaining anything to anyone. Cassian had followed at a distance. The garden room was dim. Low lighting. A few chairs arranged near the windows. No other guests. The event's main pull was in the hall, and this space existed for people who needed air without going outside. Rowan stood near the far window. Arms crossed. Not hostile. Just contained. Cassian stopped inside the doorway. Let a moment pass. Then crossed the room and stood 6 feet away and said, "He's mine!" Not a question. Rowan looked at him for a long moment. Yes. One word. Clean. Final. Cassian exhaled slowly through his nose. He had known it the second Orion turned and looked at him. Had felt it in a place that had nothing to do with thought or logic, just deep cellular recognition, something ancient and immediate and impossible to reason around. But hearing Rowan say it out loud was something different. Something heavier. How old? 2. 2 years. He did the math without wanting to. First steps. First words. First everything, all of it existing in a timeline that had nothing to do with him because he had chosen to sign papers without asking a single question. Rowan! Don't. Cassian stopped. Whatever you're about to say. Rowan's voice was steady. Quiet. The kind of quiet that came from practice. I've already said it to myself. Every version of it. I've had 2 years. I know. You don't get to start with an explanation. I'm not starting with an explanation. Rowan waited. Cassian looked at him directly, no deflection, no angle, no executive composure, and said, "I was wrong. Completely. I signed those papers without speaking to you. Without asking. Without giving you a single opportunity to say anything. And that decision, that was mine. Nobody forced it. I let manufactured doubt do something that should have been impossible. And I have to live with that." The room was quiet. That's it. Cassian didn't add to it. Didn't reach for more words to cover the silence. That's what I needed to say first. Rowan looked at him for a long time. Then looked out the window. He has your eyes. I noticed. He has your jaw. Your expressions. He does this thing when he's concentrating. He goes completely still. Holds his breath. And then, I do that. I know you do. Another silence. Longer this time. Not comfortable. But not nothing. I'm not forgiving you tonight, Rowan said. Still looking at the window. I need you to understand that clearly. I do. 2 years is not something you apologize away in a garden room. I know. And Orion. Rowan turned then, and his voice shifted. Just slightly, just enough to show the edge underneath the control. He's going to have questions. Real ones. And the answers matter. More than anything else right now, those answers matter. I understand. Do you? Yes. Rowan studied him. Whatever he was looking for, some flinch, some hedge, some sign that Cassian was managing this rather than meaning it, he didn't find it. He uncrossed his arms. That small. That quiet. And yet it was the most significant thing that had shifted in the room all night. Cassian took one step closer. Can I meet him? Rowan was quiet for a moment. Not tonight. Okay. But... He paused. Not never. Cassian held that. Said nothing. Because some things, handled correctly, didn't need a response. They needed time. The event continued in the hall outside. Music. Conversation. The world carrying on at its usual pace. Then Cassian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. A message from his head of security. 4 words. Crow is on property. Everything in Cassian's posture changed instantly. He looked up. Rowan read his face. What's wrong? Cassian was already moving toward the door. Where is Orion right now? With my sitter. The side room near the... He didn't wait for her to finish. He was already in the corridor. Moving fast. The side room was 60 feet away. He covered it in 10 seconds. Pushed the door open. Amara was standing in the center of the room. Alone. Her face was white. Her hands were shaking. He was right here, she said. I turned around for, it was 30 seconds. He was right here. The room was empty. Orion was gone. Cassian had the building locked in 4 minutes. Every exit sealed. Security teams deployed. Camera feeds pulled and running simultaneously on 3 monitors in the estate's private security office. Rowan stood against the wall of that office and did not move and did not speak and kept his eyes on the screens. He was not panicking. He was somewhere past panic. Past it and through it and into something cold and focused that Cassian recognized because he had felt it himself, in rooms like this, in moments like this, before love had anything to do with the stakes. But this was different. This was Orion. East Corridor, said the security analyst. Camera 4. 2 minutes ago. The footage showed a man in a service uniform moving quickly through a back hallway. Small figure at his side. Moving willingly, because Orion didn't know yet. Because Orion was 2 years old and trusted adults, and didn't know what danger looked like in a black jacket and dress shoes. Cassian looked at the uniform. Then at the man's gait. That's not staff. No, sir. Where does that corridor lead? Loading bay. East side. There's a service vehicle, It arrived 40 minutes ago. It's not on the approved vendor list. Cassian turned. His head of security was already moving. 3 more men fell in behind him. Rowan. Cassian stopped at the door. Look back. Rowan met his eyes. Stay here. Absolutely not. 1 second. Stay close. They moved. The loading bay was through 2 sets of service doors and down a utility stairwell that smelled like concrete and cleaning supplies. The kind of space that existed in every large building and went completely unnoticed until something went wrong. Something was wrong now. The service vehicle was still there. Engine running. Cassian's team fanned out. 2 men went left. 2 went right. Cassian and Rowan went straight. The vehicle's rear doors were closed but not latched. The latch was hanging, the door pulled to but not sealed, the kind of detail that happens when someone is moving fast and not thinking about the exit plan clearly enough. Cassian pulled the door. Orion was sitting on a folded tarp in the back. Not crying. Holding his shoe. Looking at it very seriously, the way he looked at things that needed examining. He looked up when the door opened. Saw Rowan. His face did the thing it always did, immediate, total, no delay, and he lifted both arms. Daddy! Rowan was inside the vehicle in one motion. Orion against his chest. Both arms around him. Not moving. Not speaking. Just holding. Cassian stood at the open door and watched and felt something shift inside him that had nothing to do with the investigation or Darius or any of the things that would need to happen in the next hours. It was simpler than that. It was the image of his son. Pressing his face against Rowan's shoulder, while Rowan's eyes closed and his whole body exhaled 2 years of carrying something alone. Cassian looked away. Gave them the moment. His security team had the driver contained 30 feet away. The man was already talking, the kind of talking that happened fast when the alternative became clear. He confirmed what Cassian had already known. Darius Crow. Not in the building anymore. Gone the moment Cassian's team moved. Practical to the end. Cassian's phone was already at his ear. Find him. 2 words. That was enough. Back at the vehicle, Orion had leaned back and was looking at Cassian with those eyes, studying him the way he studied things that required careful attention. Cassian crouched. Eye level. Hey! Orion considered him. You came fast, Orion said. I did. Why? Cassian held his gaze. Because that's what I should have done a long time ago. Orion thought about this. Seemed to find it acceptable. Then reached out one small hand and pressed it flat against Cassian's jaw. The way children touch things they're deciding whether to trust. Cassian didn't move. Didn't say anything. Just stayed still. And let his son decide. 3 weeks after the gala, Darius Crow was arrested. No spectacle. No public confrontation. Just a quiet afternoon. 2 federal agents, a warrant, the kind of end that happens when the evidence is thorough and patient and built correctly from the start. The case was airtight. The secondary analyst had done the kind of work that couldn't be argued around. Financial fraud. Witness tampering. Conspiracy in the kidnapping attempt. The charges stacked fast and the courtroom would sort the rest. Cassian didn't watch it happen. He was somewhere else that afternoon. A park. 3 blocks from Rowan's apartment. The same bench Rowan had been sitting on for 2 years, most mornings, with a coffee going cold while Orion ran his loop along the path. Cassian sat on one end of the bench. Rowan sat on the other. Orion was doing the loop. Arms wide. Completely absorbed in the specific project of running as fast as his legs would allow. The morning was cold and clean. Either of them spoke for a while. That was okay. There was something in the quiet that felt different from the garden room. Less weight. Not resolved, that was too simple a word for what 2 years of distance required, but different. The kind of quiet between people who have said the important things and are now deciding what comes next. He asked me again this morning, Rowan said. Cassian looked over. About you. Rowan watched Orion round the far end of the path. He asks every morning now. Since the gala. What do you tell him? That you're coming. Cassian was quiet. Are you okay with that? I'm the one who told him. Another stretch of quiet. Orion had stopped at the far end of the path. Was crouching over something on the ground, a stone, possibly, or a bug, or something completely invisible that only he could identify as significant. He was very serious about it. I'm not asking you to forgive me on a timeline, Cassian said. I know. And I'm not asking to come back into your life the way things were. I know that too. I'm asking to be his father. Every day. Consistently. Without conditions. He paused. Whatever that looks like from your end. Whatever pace you need. That's the conversation. Rowan looked at him. Not the guarded look from the garden room. Something more open. More tired, maybe, the kind of tired that came from carrying something alone for so long that the prospect of sharing the weight felt both wanted and unfamiliar. He needs you to be steady, Rowan said. Not impressive. Steady. I understand the difference. Do you live it? I'm learning to. Rowan nodded. Slowly. Like he was noting it. Not granting it, not confirming it, just noting that the answer had been given and time would do the rest. Orion came running back. Both shoes on this time. Face flushed from the cold. He came directly to the bench and climbed up between them, not choosing a side, just placing himself exactly in the middle the way children do when the middle is the only position that makes sense. He leaned against Rowan's arm. Then looked over at Cassian. You came again. I said I would. Orion appeared to find this entirely reasonable. Then he reached sideways and took Cassian's hand with both of his. And held it. Just held it. The way children hold things, completely, without strategy, without any idea that the gesture was the most important thing that had happened in that park in a very long time. Cassian looked down at those small hands wrapped around his. He didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stayed exactly where he was. And let the morning be what it was. Rowan looked at the two of them. Then looked out at the path. The world kept going. Buses. Pigeons. A delivery man with a cart. All the ordinary things of an ordinary morning, continuing exactly as they always did, completely indifferent to the fact that three people on a park bench had just found the beginning of something they hadn't known how to name until now. Not a perfect family. Not a fixed past. Just a decision. Made in the cold morning air, without ceremony, without promises that couldn't yet be kept, to stop letting fear be louder than the truth. That night, after Orion was asleep, Cassian sat alone in his car outside the apartment building. He wasn't going up. That wasn't tonight. Tonight was just this, the quiet knowledge that the hardest part wasn't the confrontation, or the rescue or the confession in the garden room. The hardest part was showing up tomorrow. And the day after. And every day after that, without the performance of the grand gesture, just the plain, unglamorous, daily work of being someone worth trusting. He started the car. Drove home. The penthouse was still the same. But when he walked in and sat at the desk and looked at the city outside the window, it didn't feel empty. Not entirely. Not anymore. 1 week later, a sealed envelope arrived at Cassian's office. No return address. His name on the label in handwriting he didn't recognize. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single document. A medical report. His name was on it. And a second name he didn't recognize. His brow tightened. He read the first paragraph. Read it again. His hand went still on the desk. He reached for his phone. Called Rowan. It rang twice. Cassian? A pause. He looked at the report. At the second name. At the date at the top of the document. Rowan. His voice was different now. Careful. Steady over something unsteady. I need to ask you something. And I need you to tell me the truth. Silence on the other end. Then, what is it? Cassian exhaled. Orion isn't the only one, is he? The line went quiet. Completely. For 4 full seconds. And in those 4 seconds, the entire shape of what came next changed. That ending just changed everything. If you felt that, if your jaw dropped, drop a comment right now. Tell me what you think that report means. Tell me what you think Rowan is going to say. And if this story moved you, shared something real with you, or made you feel something you didn't expect, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss part 2, because what's coming next is going to hit harder than anything in this story. See you there.